Geography and the Early Settlement of India. As we move away from the Middle East and over to the Indian Peninsula, we are going to take a deeper look at ancient India, which is a subcontinent of Asia, meaning that it is a large landmass that is smaller than a continent. If you look at a map of Asia, you can see that India is attached to this continent. Mountain ranges separate much of the Indian subcontinent from the rest of Asia. Some of the geographical elements we'll be looking at today are rivers, mountains, plains, plateaus, deserts, and valleys. Some of the major rivers are the Brahmaputra, the Ganges, and the Indus River. We will look at the Himalaya Mountains, the Hindu Kush Mountains, and the Eastern and Western Ghats Mountains. We will also look at the Deccan Plateaus, the Thar Desert, and the Indus River and the Ganges River valleys. But first, the Brahmaputra River. This river runs through the steep Himalayas, the mountains along the northern border of India. The water is clean and cold as it winds through snow-capped mountains, narrow canyons, and over sharp rocks. The river slows and deepens as it flows into the valley, where it floods every summer because of heavy monsoon rains. What's a monsoon? Well, a monsoon is a strong wind that often brings huge amounts of rain that cause the river to overflow its banks. These monsoons are important because as the river recedes or goes back down to its normal level of water, the rich minerals that have been carried down from the Himalayas remain in the soil of the valley. And we all know how much people in the ancient world love their fertile soil. Next, we have the Deccan Plateau. This is a triangle-shaped area that lies between two mountain ranges in southern India. I'm sure you'll remember from science that a plateau is an elevated or raised area of land that is flatter than a mountain. The plateau is fairly dry. There are a few rivers, but the monsoon rains provide most of the water. The soil on the plateau is black, yellow, or red. The black soil is rich in iron, making it good for growing cotton. The yellow and red soils lack key minerals, making it harder for farmers to grow plants there. Also, this area only gets about 30 inches of rain each year. Random Deccan Plateau fact. There are large granite rocks in the plateau that were formed by volcanoes. These rocks are among the world's oldest, dating back more than 600 million years. That's actually older than Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis. Now, on to the Eastern and Western Ghats. These are mountain chains near the coast of India. They are named as such because of the coast that they are near. When seen above, the Ghats form a large V, which is where the Deccan Plateau lies. The Eastern Ghat isn't as wet as the Western Ghat, and there are a few rivers that run through them. Even though these rivers rarely flood, they are unsafe for travel as they move rapidly, contain many rocks, and often plunge suddenly over cliffs. Next, we'll look at the Ganges River. The Ganges River flows across most of northern India, starting in the Himalayan mountains. The river makes its way south through ice, rocks, and valleys carrying silt. Hey, we know what that is! It brings lots of fertile mud! Yes, we do. Anyway, it carries the silt from the Himalayas to the northern plains, leaving rich sediment behind. As a result, the northern plains contain some of the most fertile land in the world. But just like all those other flooding rivers we've learned about, during rainy season, the river can flood and destroy crops planted along its banks. Did you know there's an ancient Indian story about the Ganges River? According to this story, a river god and a river goddess once lived in the snow-covered Himalayas. One day, the two decided to race down the mountains to the plains below. The river goddess sped straight down and won the race. But her joy soon turned to worry. Where was the river god? Well, he had slowed down to admire the snow-capped mountains and the rich brown earth in the valleys. In time, he flowed down to meet his goddess. The two rivers became one, joined forever on Indians' plains, and making land good for farming. Do you know the other river in this ancient story? That's right, it's the Brahmaputra River. And now for the Himalaya Mountains. You may have heard of one particularly famous mountain in this range, Mount Everest, which happens to be the tallest mountain in the world. The Himalayas are located along India's northern border and is the highest mountain range in the world. Mount Everest is its peak, reaching 5.5 miles into the sky. That's almost 97 football fields into the air. Because of their height and location, the Himalayas form a natural barrier between the Indian subcontinent and most of the rest of Asia. Also, they can get up to 10 feet of snow in just one storm, which is why they are called the Himalayas, meaning home of snows. Water from glaciers in the Himalaya Mountains feeds northern India's major rivers. Lastly, even though Mount Everest is already the tallest in the world, it actually keeps growing each year. That's right, the earth underneath this mountain range is always moving, causing Mount Everest to rise a little higher every year. That also means this area is used to earthquakes and landslides. Fun fact, the upper peaks of the Himalayas are always covered in snow and ice, and temperatures on the highest peaks never rise above freezing temperatures and can actually go as low as negative 76 degrees. Another mountain range in India lies on the northwestern part of the country, just above the Indus River. Don't worry, we'll get to that river next. This mountain range is called Hindu Kush Mountains. It's a rugged barrier between the Indus River Valley and current-day Afghanistan. While this range isn't as high as the Himalayan mountain range, it is still one of the tallest in the world, with some of its peaks reaching almost 5 miles into the air, and many of its parts being unlivable. The Khyber Pass is a gap in the mountains that is 30 miles long, connecting Central Asia to India. Both traders and invaders use this pass to enter the Indus River Valley. Now, on to the Indus River. This river begins in the Himalaya Mountains and also gets water from the melting snow in the Hindu Kush Mountains, keeping the water level high. The Indus River Valley contains some of the best farmland in the world. Like the Ganges River, the Indus River carries silt from the mountains to the plains. The silt leaves the surrounding soil rich and fertile. It has often been compared to Egypt's Nile River because it too is an important source of the water for farmland that lies along its banks. And finally, we have the Thar Desert. It's located in northern India and has huge sand dunes, little plant life, and extreme heat. Dust storms are common. Animals such as lizards, snakes, and gazelles, and a variety of birds live here. So I guess the question now is, where would you live in India? Keep in mind the environmental factors we discussed, such as water, topography, and plant life. These things affect India's geography. Would you live along the Ganges River and maybe even into its valley where there's lots of fertile mud? Or perhaps along the Indus River and its valley. Maybe you want to rough it in the Himalayas so you can be at the top of the world. Don't forget your jacket. Or perhaps you see the Deccan Plateau as a little warmer and drier, even though it's not very hospitable to growing crops. If the plateau isn't hot enough for you, you could always try the Thar Desert and hang out with some lizards and gazelles. But if you're really hardcore, you'll try the unlivable Hindu Kush Mountains. At least they're not as high as Everest. And if those two mountain ranges don't work for you, don't worry, we've got two more down in southern India, the Eastern and Western Ghats. So, where would you live? This was the same question that faced India's ancient civilizations as they discovered the best places for survival. Discuss your ideas with your table group, and then read about what the ancient Indian civilizations decided.